Garrick sits at a wooden table in the corner of the dimly lit tavern, the crackling of the hearth casting flickering shadows across his weathered face. His hand wraps around a simple tankard, and his voice is steady, yet vibrant with the memories of battles past. His eyes gleam with a mixture of excitement and wisdom as he begins his tale. Ah, the tale of the dragon, a beast of such ferocity. It took weeks of preparation before I could even dare to step foot in its lair. It was not the kind of battle one could charge into unthinking, sword drawn and heart ablaze. No, this fight required patience, planning, and tools, each one of which had its own story. Garrick takes a slow breath, as if he can still smell the acrid air from the dragon's lair, thick with sulfur and old death. I stood at the mouth of the cave, the smell of burning stone and flesh hanging heavy in the air. The heat from the dragon's breath had scorched the very earth around the entrance. I could hear it breathing slow and deep, like the bellows of a forge, its breath echoing in the cavern. My fingers tightened around the hilt of my sword, but it was not just steel that would win this fight. I had something far more precious to rely on. He taps his chest with a quiet chuckle. Ah, the phoenix feather. It had been given to me by a reclusive alchemist in the northern wilds, a place where the snow never melts. It was there, after days of trudging through icy wastes, that I found her. She lived in a cave, a place not unlike the dragon's lair, though far colder. She had warned me, you see, told me that if I ever faced a creature born of flame, this feather would be my salvation. It was her life's work, a relic that could absorb the fire and keep me from being consumed. But like all gifts, it was not easily earned. His gaze drifts for a moment, and the tavern fades as the memory of the cold northern winds fills the space. I remember the wind biting at my face as I climbed the icy peak to her home. The path was treacherous, a narrow ledge where one wrong step would have sent me plummeting into the abyss. The only sound was the crunch of snow beneath my boots and the howl of the wind, as if the very mountains sought to drive me away. When I finally reached her, she tested me with riddles and trials of magic, for no alchemist worth their salt gives away such treasures to any wanderer. But when I answered her riddles and passed her tests, she handed me the feather with a knowing look. I knew then it would play a part in something great, but I didn't know how soon. Garrick's voice grows quieter as he returns to the present, back in the dragon's lair. He clenches his fist as if holding the feather again. And now, there I stood, before the dragon's fire. Its eyes gleamed, two massive pools of molten gold, and its scales shimmered like burnished bronze. As it rose from the depths of the cave, it let out a roar that shook the very bones of the earth. The heat hit me first, waves of it rolling off its body, scorching the stones beneath my feet. I held the phoenix feather tightly, and as the dragon breathed, a torrent of flame hotter than any forge, I thrust the feather in front of me. The fire hit, but the feather glowed, absorbing the heat, shielding me from the inferno. He pauses, letting the tension hang in the air as the imagined roar of the dragon echoes through the minds of his listeners. Once the flames died down, I knew I had to move quickly. Dragons are clever beasts, you see. It would know I had some protection, and it would change its tactics. But I was prepared for that as well. He reaches to his belt, his hand brushing over an imaginary pouch. The next item I pulled was a vial of powder, something I had traded for in a desert far to the east. It was called the Sand of Stillness, taken from the heart of the Great Dunes, a place where time itself seems to slow. I had traveled with a caravan for weeks across that wasteland, where the sun bakes the very life out of you. There I met a merchant, a strange man with a long cloak and eyes like a hawk. He spoke little, but his wares were unmatched. The powder was his most prized possession. He said it could slow the movements of any creature, even a dragon. The memory shifts, the image of the desert sun, and the merchant's piercing gaze filling Garrick's mind. It wasn't a simple trade, though. I had to offer him something in return, something of value. A map, you see. A map I had found in the ruins of an ancient city, long buried beneath the sands. It led to a treasure he had sought for years. So the trade was made, and I left with the sand of stillness, not knowing when I might need it. Back in the present, Garrick lets out a slow breath as he recalls the moment in the dragon's lair. I threw the powder into the air, and as it touched the ground, time seemed to slow. The dragon's movements became sluggish, its great claws scraping against the stone floor in slow motion. Its tail, which had been lashing violently, now moved like a shadow passing across the ground. I had only moments, but it was enough. Garrick's hand moves to his sword, the final piece of his plan. My sword. Ah, that's another tale in itself. This blade forged from the metal of a fallen star. It was not just any sword, it was a weapon forged for one purpose, to pierce the hide of a dragon. I had ventured deep into the mountains, to a smith whose craft was said to be blessed by the gods themselves. It was there, amidst the glowing embers and ringing of hammer on anvil, that the sword was born. But even then the smith had warned me, this blade will strike true, but only if your heart is steady. And I knew then that the real test was not the strength of my arm, but the strength of my spirit. Garrick's eyes narrow as he speaks of the final moments of the battle. I approach the dragon, its head lowering, eyes glaring at me in slow, molten fury. Its scales gleamed, the heat of its body still palpable even through the haze of the powder. I raised my sword high, my heart steady, my breath calm, and then I struck. The blade sank deep, past the scales, into the heart of the beast. A roar erupted from the dragon, shaking the cavern one last time, but I held firm. He leans back, a satisfied smile creeping across his face. And with that, the dragon fell. Its body collapsed, sending a tremor through the ground. The fire in its eyes dimmed, and the cavern grew still. The phoenix feather had shielded me from its fire. The sand of stillness had slowed its deadly strikes, and the blade of a fallen star had ended its reign. Garrick lets out a contented sigh, his fingers tracing the rim of his tankard. Each item had its place, each piece of the puzzle gathered over years of adventure. And the lesson, you ask? Well, if there's one thing to take from this tale, it's that no challenge is conquered alone. It takes the wisdom to prepare, the courage to face the unknown, and the patience to gather the tools you'll need along the way. For every adventure has its battles, but it is the journey that arms you for the fight. He lifts his tankard, taking a long, slow sip as the tavern hums with quiet admiration, the tail of the dragon hanging in the air like the smoke from the hearth. My friend, I hope you've enjoyed this story time. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel so we can have more time together like this. Hit the bell notification to ensure you don't miss more stories and meditations. And always remember, there are stories to tell.